there. Welcome to the channel. I'm Cassidy Cash, and this is the place where we talk about history, specifically what was going on between 1564 and 1616. That's the lifespan of William Shakespeare. I'll show you where history is reflected in Shakespeare's plays, and on this channel, we talk a lot about games, recipes, and crafts from the 16th and 17th century. If that all sounds like your cup of tea, or maybe your mug of mead, then please hit that like and subscribe button because I'm here every week. Have you ever wondered how Columbus could mistake North America for India? Have you thought that this mistake indicated he was not only a horrible explorer, but couldn't even read a map? Well, in defense of poor old Columbus, and I guess to fight against a little bit of historical ignorance when it comes to some assumptions about Columbus, I thought we should check out the maps he was using for ourselves to find out exactly what they have to say about Columbus and navigation at sea. Are you ready to challenge some of your assumptions? Let's dive in right now at That Shakespeare Life. When Columbus set sail for the New World in 1492, it's important to understand that he wasn't actually trying to get to what we call the New World today. You see, astronomers, including this guy called Paolo dal Pozzo Toscanelli, had proposed the idea that it was possible to sail across the Atlantic as a faster way to get to the Spice Islands. So there was a lot of trade going on in the Indies, places like China and Japan, and of course, India. At that time, the traditional route to get there included some treacherous seas, not only because the water itself was pretty dangerous, but because there was things like pirates along the way who would try to rob your ships. It just wasn't a really good option. So when Columbus was finally financed on his voyage by Ferdinand and Isabella of Spain, he secured that funding in part because he proposed to essentially try out this theory. He was going to try and go across the Atlantic to get to the Indies. And he was going to map out a safer route for other explorers that would come after him in the process. Now, Ferdinand and Isabella thought that this was a really good idea, so they financed his journey. Now, if you're like me at this point, you're probably wondering how in the world did he even think this was possible? You see, here's a map of the world from 1508. This map is called the Lennox Globe, and it was technically drawn in 1508. That's when they date this map too. But it's based on a globe by Martin Behaim. I think I'm saying that right. Behaim. Anyway, he made it in 1492. And by based on, I mean that even though the Lennox map was drawn later, all the place locations are the same as they would have been for maps in 1492. So as you take a look at this map, tell me something. Do you see anything glaring? That's right. The entire continent of North America and most of Central America, where Columbus landed, is literally missing from this map. That's one reason the continent of North America is referred to as the New World, because prior to explorers like Columbus, Europeans had no knowledge of these locations at all. They simply didn't know they were there. Now, as my kids pointed out, not knowing something is there is different from it not actually being there. So it is worth pointing out that there were people in the world who knew about it. The people who lived here knew about it. And sections of North America were actually known about by the Vikings, but those areas were really good for fishing. And by and large, the Vikings kept their knowledge under wraps. So without the advent of things like a global communication system, there wasn't a way for the people who lived here to let people in other parts of the world know that they lived here when the two sides didn't know about each other. So the North Americans weren't aware of the Europeans, and the Europeans were not aware of the people who lived here in North America until explorers arrived here and created that connection. So when you look at this map, it looks possible to set sail from Europe and go across the Atlantic. And if you're operating off of a round globe model, you could set out, go across the Atlantic, and your expectation, according to the professional maps of the day, is that you're going to land in the Indies by doing that. So that's why he called the people he encountered Indians. He thought they were natives of the Indies. Now, later, all these details would get sorted out, and by the time Shakespeare is alive, globes from his lifetime have North America and even Central America on the map, including some details about places like Bermuda and some islands and much more details. And this was thanks in part to people like John Smith. Part of his job when he came over here was to explore the New World and create maps. And John Smith is one of the reasons that we have detailed maps of New England, because he came over here and he mapped them before anybody knew what was there. You can see this history reflected in Shakespeare's plays when we see references to Indians, which is a term held over from Columbus's exploration when he thought, as I mentioned, that he'd arrived in the Indies. But the fact that nobody knew North America was here is why explorers were important. And it's why governments like Ferdinand and Isabella were willing to finance at great expense these explorations and even the establishment of colonies in these new places. They were wanting to better understand the world and what was in it. There was a need to map the oceans. They did need a trade route to get from where they were to where their customers were, or to get from where they were to where their clients were. You know, trade went both ways along these trade routes, and they needed ways to have transoceanic travel and know what they're going to encounter when they're going from place to place. So without things like satellites or other technology that we have today, the only way to find out what was in the ocean and what the coastlines look like or where the dangers were at was to send people out on a boat to go find out, go into the wilderness and report back if you live. You know, I mean, it was this hugely monumental thing to ask somebody to do. It was extremely dangerous because you didn't know what you might find. And like Columbus, you might end up in a completely new continent you didn't even know was there. Let me know what you think. Certainly the maps are amazing, and I think it's wild that North America was totally missing from the maps in 1508. But that's it for this week. Thank you for watching. I'm Cassidy Cash, and I hope you learned something new about the Bard. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.